Welcome back. I'm sure you'll be glad that we've now created an executable pipeline which copies the data as required. But as we all know, in the real world things don't always happen as expected. So we need to handle a couple of scenarios so that the pipeline can be improved to make it production ready and handle the scenarios in the real world. Let's have a look at the first scenario. Let's assume that our source data has been made available by another system within our organization. The data is made available daily, and it could become available anytime during the day, and we don't know what time it becomes available. We need to process the data as soon as it's become available. There are multiple ways of achieving this, but as we are learning about the pipelines and activities, I'm going to show you how to do this with a control flow activity in Data Factory. So let's switch over to the Data Factory and get started. Here we are in the Data Factory, and this is the pipeline that we created. For our scenario, we can schedule the pipeline to run every day at midnight, and then we can use an activity to ensure that the pipeline only continues once the file has arrived. So Data Factory gives you an activity called validation, which is available under the general grouping here. So let's drag that into here. And I'm going to call this check if file exists. And in the settings, these are the important things. So we want to select the data set which we want to check for. In our case, that is the raw gzip file. And these are the important settings. So timeout basically tells you the duration for which we want to be looking for the file for. In our case, we want to check if a file has arrived within the 24 hours period, which is 1 day. So I put the timeout as 1. So what happens is if the file arrives within the 1 hour, then it succeeds. The validation activity itself succeeds, otherwise it'll fail with an error called timeout. I'll show you all of that in a bit. And the sleep here, this is the interval which we want to be checking for the file. You don't want to be checking for the file every second, but you specify how often do you want to check for the file. In this case, it is 10 seconds. So what you specify here is seconds. So if you are checking for a whole day, you don't want to be checking for the file every 10 seconds. You might probably go for 600, which is like 10 minutes. And also what you can specify is actually what's the size of the file. So when a file is usually being written, it'll just change in size. So it might start from 0 and then it'll increase in size. You don't want to be picking up a file which is one layer written halfway. It's not completely written. So in that case, you can specify a size for the file. So for example, you could say my file is at least 1 kilobytes. So you go for 1024. What you specify here is in bytes. So in this case, by doing this, we've achieved what we want to achieve, which is we want to check for a day to see if a file arrives at any point in time. And when the file arrives, we want to succeed the activity. This is not everything. What we want to do is we want to connect these two activities, so we want to make that one dependent on this one. For that, what you do is you click on this green button here, which is on success, and then you drag it over to this activity. So now this will only run when this activity succeeds. There are other things you can do. So when this fails, if you wanted to do something else, for example, you want to send out an email, then you can do that as well. So you click on this cross button. And then you can have another activity tied to that failure as well. So that's pretty much everything, but I want to show you how it works by debugging it. But in order to debug, we don't want to be sitting here waiting for a day. So I'm going to change this to 30 seconds and then check for the file every 10 seconds. What I'm going to do is I'm going to delete the file at the same time so that the file's not there. So if I go back to my storage account and this is the file, and if I delete that, so that's now being deleted. So there is no file to process. So what I would expect is when I debug this pipeline, I want it to fail after 30 seconds because we only are checking for 30 seconds, as you can see. And within the 30 seconds, we are checking 3 times. So let's look at the output, and it's now running. As you can see here, now it's timed out, but let's test the other scenario where actually we put the file back while it's running, just so I've got enough time to put the file back and I can show you all the scenarios. I'm going to increase the timeout to 2 minutes and the interval to say 20 seconds. We can leave it as 10 seconds. And now we are going to debug the pipeline. As we know, there is no data at the moment, so after 10 seconds, it's still looking for the file. So I'm going to put the file back now. So let's upload the file, and that is a gzip file. So let's open it and upload it. It's doing the transfer. Yeah, the file's back now. So if I come back here, the pipeline should have succeeded. So it's succeeded now, and it's done the copy as well. So as you can see, you can use the validation activity to ensure that the file you're looking for has arrived. And if it hasn't, you can keep looking for the file for a certain amount of duration. So that's effectively what the validation activity does. There are documentations on the Microsoft website. I would encourage you guys to have a look at it because things change every day. But I've explained everything in here. I think that's the end of this session. We'll look at the second scenario in the next session.